Sine, and I have been teaching economics for many years, and I'm very excited to be a part of Victoria Online Academy. And today to bring this topic to you about labor market, and that's the according to Cambridge is a paper three part of the paper three. Okay, so as I talk about labor market, it's very interesting, and then but today I'm going to really focus on theory. You might not be very excited, I know, but theory is important, and theory can help us to understand the reality. Even though reality is very complicated, there are many dimensions in reality and many factors that affect. However, the theory is a benchmark, and we have to really look at this. So our objectives are for today. So for first, we will look at the labor supply. We will see how we will describe how the worker's decision about time preference gives the rise to labor supply. So we can see how the labor supply actually is rising. And then we will look into labor demand, and then we will determine, we'll put them together and we'll determine the equilibrium wage and the level of employment in a labor market when the market both is perfectly competitive and not perfectly competitive, it's imperfect, and we can kind of compare and contrast the wage level and an employment level in these three different markets. Okay, so this is our agenda. We'll start with the circular flow model, and we'll just go until with a quick quiz. We'll finish with a quick quiz together. Okay. Let's start with the circular flow model. The circular flow model you already heard, but I know it's very good. It's very good mimic of our reality. It shows the economic interaction between households, firms, markets, and even government, and even foreign sector. You can also include it for complexity. It shows also the flows of money, how the money flows, and actually the two parts are equal to each other. Now let's look at this. Who is actually supplying the labor? And labor, as you know, what is labor? Labor is our abilities, labor is our skills, and it's our actually workforce, right? Your parents might be working, and you might be working, and that's us households supplying our labor. And what we get, who needs our labor? So of course the firms need our labor. The firms need the labor. Why? Because they will have to go to produce goods and sell those goods, provide those goods in a product market. So this is kind of connection here. So households supplying the labor, and labor is going to firms, and then the firms are using all the resources. It's not only labor that we can supply sort of capital, land, our entrepreneurship skills, and then they can put them together and produce goods and services for us, and we can go back to the market and buy those. By which money? The money also the firms, when it's actually buying the labor from us, they also pay a price, and that price is called, by the way, wage. You may already learn this before, because this is one of the first models you learn in your economics courses. But this is a circular flow model is also good, that shows how demand is actually for labor is derived demand. There is no straight connection here, but it shows that the market it shows that if the firms there is no demand in there is no demand in a product market, there won't be actually demand for labor from the firms. What does this mean? For example, if we don't buy a good, some of the goods, right, the firms won't make it, and that means they also will not need our labor for those skills. Those are skills that we can provide them. For example, opposite scenario is the high demand for high-tech products, right? Recently leads to demand more IT workers, right? And in different sectors of the labor market, it's actually different, yeah? We have more demand in some certain sector, and we have less demand as the economy is evolving and changing its direction, and especially now as well. Okay, now let's look at our next slide. It's supply of labor. The supply of labor, we start with the supply of labor. So as we talk about the model, so I'm going to show the curve. How does it look? You can see the curve is you can see the curve is actually backward. So it's going upward and then backward. And most of the textbooks really don't show that labor supply has this kind of shape. They will just focus only this part. So they will just have this part only and just the upward slope. Look at our model. It has two factors. So one is the quantity of our work measured in hours, and the other one is the hourly wage, right? And then you can see, it's because it has upward slope. As the hour wage is increasing, right? As the wage is increasing, the more labor will be supplied. Ceteris paribus, other things are equal, right? We don't consider other factors. But let's look what else we could do if we are not working. So there are other alternative. We can talk about leisure, right? Leisure, it can be traveling. You can use your time to do nothing, or you can use your time just to travel or do something you like it, yeah, or just doing nothing. So this is two things actually are best alternative options you can substitute with each other. And actually it's also, we can say, remember the concept of opportunity cost you learned before. So you can say that's also it's also opportunity cost, right? For example, if the hourly wage is increasing, the opportunity cost of the leisure is increasing. So you might think, oh, why? The wage is so high. Why I should be sleeping on my sofa rather than going and work, right? That's your opportunity cost, and that's why this is two things you can substitute each other. So that's why, look at this, when the wage is rising, yeah, so you will say, okay, let me go and work. So that's why you will be working. But it comes to time when there's an income effect. When the wage is so high, then income effect is so high. Then in this case, the income effect substitutes also exceeds as the substitution effect actually. In that case, you say, okay, why not I will work less hours, and because I still get higher pay, right? And I will just spend the other time on my leisure. And that's why it happens for some people when they had their income is so high, they work less hours, and that's why the curve goes the backward. But we don't really consider this backward side of this labor supply because for majority of us, as the wage is increasing, the majority will be supplying more labor. So that's why we just focus only this part. Okay, so now if this is the wage, what will happen? If this is the wage, right? If what will happen if there are other factors, right? Because we know that not only the wage can make us work more or less, there are also other factors that can also change our behavior, whether to supply more or less labor. Okay, those are called, usually in economics, we're called shifters, right? Or factors or determinants, you can say. So let's look at some of the labor supply shifters. Here are a few of them written for you. So it's the changes in preferences and social norms. Changes in preferences and social norms. So what is this? So there are some preferences. It can come from you or from the government or from probably from government, and also social norms also can come from the government. For example, if teachers needs to have certificates, and then right, and then that makes it more complicated for more people to become teachers, because they have to really go through this examination and get those certificates. So what will happen? So if there are really hard social norms, let's say, and that will shift our supply curve to the left, right? Let's look at the second one. But if changes in population, Okay, let's say favorable change in population. There is a more increase in population. There's a baby booms or whatever you are expecting in 10, 20 years. Then it's going to be more supply labor in a labor market. So the labor supply curve will shift, will shift to the rightward. Okay, so let's say this is our labor supply. And unfavorable changes, for example, if something happened, let's say disasters and anything, then it will shift to the left. To the left. Okay. Okay, now let's look at changes in opportunities. This is also some kind of opportunities. If there are favorable opportunities, more opportunities, then more labor supply. So not, it will shift to the left. The next one is changing in wealth. Let's say you came to the age and then somehow your grandparents left you with a good wealth, and then what you will do, will you like to work more? Maybe no, maybe you'll say, okay, I'll just invest the money in a bank and have a more leisure. So that means if you have more wealth given to you by inheritance, let's say, then that means, and many of you are like this, then the supply will be also contracting and shifting to the left. Yeah, one of the examples recently in the news I heard that's recent Trump's policy banning 4 types of working visas. So that can also affect the U.S. labor market by contracting the labor supply. So the supply will probably shift to the left as there are more people or banned or maybe suspended to work in the country. Okay, let's move next. Okay, so if next it will be the labor demand. Labor demand is a bit complicated because we also call it MRP, and now we're going to really see what is MRP. MRP is actually labor demand, but it has also a name. Let's open that up. So MRP means marginal product, marginal revenue or product of labor. So that will be marginal product of labor, MRPL, or in old textbooks, also in perfect competition models, they use mostly VMPL, which is called value of marginal product of labor. If you really look at the theory and we take a factory, let's say the factory, when the factory has to decide how many workers to hire, they will look at the they will look at the worker, at the how many workers to hire. They will look at the worker, how much value the worker will bring to the factory. It's easier to bring an example of factory rather than in a company, because for company they look also the productivity, but the measuring it's a bit hard. So the marginal product was like easier, because if they make a product, then we know how many products they made it, right? For an assembly line worker, let's say. But does it make sense to the employer to count how many products it makes? Of course, it doesn't really make sense in physical terms. So the employer has to really convert into monetary terms. How can it convert into monetary terms? He can multiply. Yeah, here he can multiply with product price. Yeah, here, so we can see that here. So the how many product, how many additional product the additional worker brings, that is marginal product of labor, multiply with the product price. So this way the employer will know how much value is the worker that he hired will make for the company, for the factory. And that will be his demand, because it will that will be his demand. Here we can see that's the will demand, because he will decide how many of them hire based how much also it will pay to them, right? If they bring more value, then right, they will hire it. But if they bring less value than you pay, then it doesn't really make sense, right? Okay, so that's our MRPL or VMPL. Here we can see that's a MRPL or VMPL for perfect model, and that's our based on a wage rate, right? On a wage rate and then the quantity of labor. This is two factor, ceteris paribus, other things, right? Other things are equal. However, there are also other things that can affect our this MRPL curve to really move entire curve from its place, right? From its position. So whether to the left, whether to the left or whether to the right. So what are those shifters? What are those shifters that's of labor demand? So we have few shifters here for you. So one of those are changes in product prices. As you remember, I mentioned you that labor demand is derived demand. So definitely product prices, any change in a product market can actually affect the labor demand. So if the product prices are increasing, that means the producers are have more incentives to produce more because of the profit they can gain if the costs are same and the product prices are going. So that the difference is the profit they gain. So they are very excited to produce more. But to produce more, of course, they need to hire more workers, right? So that's why if the prices go up, yeah, let's say if the product prices go up, so the labor demand or MRPL, let's write an MRPL also will increase. So our labor supply, our labor demand curve will shift to the rightward. Okay, so let's look at an opposite scenario with a go down and we'll go to the left. Okay, now let's look at the changes in supply of other factors. If you have more of other factors of let's say more land, more capital, and more entrepreneur skills, ideas, then of course you will need more labor to put them together, to work them together. So, and the last one is the changes in technology. Technology is a bit controversial. You might think, oh, because of the technology, some let's say some industries they might replace the workers with the robots, and that's happening in somehow in mostly automobile industry, right? But it's not the case. With the technology improvement means the workers also becoming more productive. If the productivity is increasing, then you will need more workers. So actually, this is also the technology improves. Yeah, let's say improves. Then the labor demand will shift to the right. So it's actually favorable. We look at the favorable situation of technology, because with the technology, the labor also become more productive. And what is the profit maximizing hiring decision? That's where the MRPL equals to the wage. Now let's look at for this one, let's look at this table. So look at this. This is quantity of labor. This is for each labor, the marginal product that labor can make. And this is the price. And because this is the perfect market, the price is constant. The firms are price takers. No one has the power to change the price. And MRPL will be just MPL multiplied with P, right? So with 19 times 20 will be 380. So, and the wage is also constant because this is also perfect labor market. So the wage is also people are also wage takers. They are labor, so the labor supply is also horizontal. So let's see. So in this case, yes, they will hire because the MRPL or VMPL, the value that every additional worker brings, it's higher. So they will hire. Okay, they will hire as well. But here, no, because the one who brings the number 6 worker will brings less value than you pay for it. Of course, it doesn't make sense for you. You won't hire. So this is how the employer will make a decision how many workers to hire, and that will determine the level of employment in the economy if every employer follows this. Okay. So now let's look at this one, equilibrium in labor market. Perfect competitive model. So once we know that the equilibrium, once we know the labor supply, the slope is, we can see that's upward. We talk about that. As the higher the price of the labor, the wage, the more labor it will be supplied. And we saw that the wage is higher and the less the labor will be demanded for the firms. We saw that, and it does make sense actually to understand why both sides, the suppliers and demanders, the firms and households, behave like that, right? So it does really make sense. So the equilibrium wage will be when the two curves are intersecting together. So we have this one. So that will be our equilibrium wage, and that will be our employment level. This is the place we call the happy place. We know that at this place, the people are happy to supply. At this wage, they are happy to work, and at this wage also the employers are happy to pay their payee. And we can see there is no unemployment, nothing here. But of course, this is theory, and then the theory is nice, right? However, we know that there are more factors, and we're going to talk about later. Okay, so those other factors, if any other factor that can happen, and we talk about those shifters, right? So any change that can happen with any of shifter of any of curve or labor supply or labor demand. For example, if I just make this kind of shift, right, there is more labor supply because of the preferences or weaker social norms. So there are more people in a market supplying, or the women has also, we can think of the women also entered to the labor force, and there is more labor in a market. But you can see what happens with the equilibrium wage and equilibrium employment level. You can see the wage decreased, right? And there is more also employment here. Yeah. So, and it can be also opposite scenario. So any change actually can this happy place to change, and it can go back again to it if the changes happen again. Now let's look at the firm supply and demand curves. What about the firm supply and demand curves? What we can do, we just can draw one more slide. Here we can draw more curve. So this is our wage again, and this is our QL, quantity of labor, right? And let's look at the initial one. So we can take the initial, because this is perfect model, right? For the firm, this is the market. Let's write down, this is market. Yeah, this is market. And let's say this is the firm. So because we know they are wage takers, so our labor supply will be horizontal line. Yeah, it's taking the wage from the market, and it's perfectly elastic. So they're at this wage there are many people. We can say there are many people, infinity, right? It goes perfectly elastic. Infinity people will want to work on that. But however, our MRPL for the firm, right, our MRPL or VMPL, you can put both of them together, yeah, is still downward sloping. Yeah, that will be for your firm. Okay, let's move on. Yes, now let's go to the imperfect model. This is most the realistic one, by the way, because at the moment we are looking at the labor market equilibrium, which means we are going to look at what is the wage level and the employment level in a labor market when the product market is not perfect. When the product market is not perfect, the producers have this price making power. Yeah, they have this price making power, and thereby they can the price is not constant. And if I just draw one curve for the product market, it's a P and Q, right? We can see, if you remember, there's a demand curve. It's for the firm, and then there's also MR here, right? So here, so you can see that there is a gap between price and MR. So and the demand curve is not horizontal. If you remember the perfect model, the firm demand curve was horizontal, and the price was the same, right? However, here the demand curve is downward sloping, which means if they want to produce more, you can see if they want to produce more, what they need to do, they actually need to lower their prices if they want to produce more. So now that, keep in your mind this picture and that information, and then let's look at the labor demand in a labor market when it's the product market is not perfect. So yeah, let's look at this now. So what we can see, what we need to do, because the price is not constant here, we have to replace with the MR. With the MR here, we can see now we have to replace the labor demand. Our MRPL will replace with the MR. So we'll multiply MR with the MPL, not the price. That's one thing that is going to be changed here. And as you know, the MR is lower than price, right? You can see that there's a gap between these two. It must be the case that MRPL, that's the demand for imperfect product market, for labor market, is also lower than VMPL. Let's say that's our perfect one. Okay, this is our perfect market. Okay, so in the graph here, they both are downward sloping. Yeah, they both are downward sloping. However, MRPL lies below the VMPL. Yeah, and this means that demand for labor with imperfect competition lies below the demand for labor with perfect competition. And that is true. You can see that shows that today we have lots of unemployment level, right? We can see that now we have fewer units of labor employed if the firms have this market power. Yeah, they have market power, and that is EM actually here, EM. So we can see this is less than EC. Yeah, EC with the perfect competition is here. Yeah, it will be here on ongoing the wage level, right? On the same wage level, because the labor market is still competitive. So ongoing wage level. So here we can see, yeah. Yeah, that's it for the product market when the product market is not perfect, and the labor market that's one of the imperfect models, right? But labor market is still perfect. Remember, that's why the wage is still the same. However, we have a less equilibrium with the in this scenario when the firms have a product market power. Yeah, they have a market power. Okay, now let's look next. Okay, yeah, this is a good, really a bit long table here. This shows how to calculate and determine the profit maximizing hiring level for the firm. Look at this. Let's start from beginning. So we have a quantity of labor, and then we have the how many output each labor can make. We have additional product for additional workers, so we can see that. See, for the second one, just add 9, and the third one just add 8. You can see that everyone is the total product is increasing, but the MP is always decreasing. That you might know because of diminishing marginal returns, right? The principle you learned before. And you see the price is different, as you can see, as you want to sell more, your price is going down as well. That's your demand curve in an imperfect market, because it's downward. And then we can calculate the TR. The TR will be the output times price. So this will be TR will be Q times P. You might, Q times P. And MR is the difference between TR, right, over the output. And we can see that's the case. Yeah, the difference of output. Yeah, so this is the difference. That's the MR, marginal revenue. That's the difference. The change in TR over the change in output. And you can see MR is also going down. And MRPL will just take the MPL, right? We just MPL. So this one multiplied with MR. Yeah, will be, so you can see 10 times 10, it's 100. Okay, so multiply with MR. And let's say the wage is 15. So we can see that, of course, you're making double that I'm giving you. I will hire you, and I will still hire you, but I won't hire you. So we can see the firm will decide, okay, let's just stop here, because the rest of, if I add more, and because of this principle of diminishing marginal returns, tells me that they can make less value. unless the things change in a long term, because this is working only short term, right? And that's the case, that will stop. So this is for the imperfect product market. Okay, let's look at the next. Okay, now let's look at this labor market equilibrium imperfect model. When the labor market is not perfect. Okay, when the labor market is not perfect, this is the most complicated one. Then it means we have only maybe one employer. This could be a small township with maybe just it can have also one town can have one bank or one coal mining company or just one factory, and that's the only, they have a market power. That's the only employer, right? They have a market power, and that's called actually monopsony. That is called monopsony. Marginal factor cost. Let's look at this marginal factor cost. Yeah, when we talk about we didn't talk about marginal factor cost in a perfect model because MFC is constant. It didn't change. But here, because our labor supply curve is upward sloping, which means if I want to hire more worker, I have to add the wage, right? So that means I have to add the wage. So that means my additional cost is actually going up. So that means, see, that's the case. So my MFCL is going to be higher. So it lies above the wage here. We can see that above the supply curve. And when is the profit maximizing decision for the hiring is where MFCL equals to MRPL. So that's the case. This will be the case, and when the MFCL intersects MRPL, not the labor supply. And you can see, but the problem is the wage is much lower than in a perfect model. So they pay the wage here, but they hire less. You can see before it was like here, right? In a perfect market will be this case, right? But now when they have a market, the labor market is imperfect, the monopsony case, they will hire much less and they will pay much less. So that will be the case. And let's look at the next slide, and we can see that here how to calculate MFCL. Here we can see how this is the quantity of labor and this is the wage. You can see that as the more they hire, they have to really add the wage because of this labor supply curve, because you have to really, this goes like this. Yeah, and then the total labor cost is just multiply with them how many they hire, and look at this marginal factor cost. So if they hire the third one, they have to really give the extra, the additional one. So see, they give the $2 here. So you can see that $1 here, $1 here. So that's the additional factor cost. So you have to really give the difference to other workers. So that's why the marginal factor cost is really high. So it's higher here. Okay, I think this is it mostly. Let's look at the quiz part, our quiz part. Let's do the check them together. So let's say the diagram below shows the labor market. You can, by the way, you can write down your answers quickly if you can. It's applied completely, but there is a monopsony employer, which of the following is the correct profit maximizing equilibrium labor market. Okay, so very similar to the one, the last slide we had. Let's look at the every question and I just stop where the correct answer is. So which rate is W1? Okay, first let's look which one is true and then we can go and check with one. Okay, so we have this is from the multiple choices from Cambridge revising questions. So that will be, so the wage will be W1, right? And here we have an employment level. So that will be the case, right? So will be the case and that will be the wage. And here we have, that's the case, right? So will be here. So we have a wage rate of W1 and employment level Q1. So yeah, so here we can, with this two intersection, we will see how many will worker, but the wage will be W1. Yeah, so the answer will be A. I think you did that too. Let's look at the next slide. The diagram below represents in industry's labor market, which has a monopsony employer. Okay, that's excellent. A national minimum wage is then introduced by the government. What is the impact of this labor market of the introduction of a minimum wage? Okay, so let's this is minimum wage. Yeah, when minimum wage is this is a government intervention. Okay, and now let's see what will be the correct answer. So the wage was here, right? Okay, so that was here the case, and now we have minimum wage. So the wage has been increased from Q1 to minimum. So we can see which cases that are. So to win, the wage rate false. No, that is not correct. So the wage rate rises from the no. So we have V1. Yeah. Okay, so this one makes sense. And then let's do. So the intersection of the quantity will be the where that the price control, right? This is our price control, the price floor intersects the MRPL. So that will be the case of for intersection. So this will be the case. I think that is correct. So that will be C if you got it. Okay, let's look at the last quiz. The table below provides some data on the quantity of labor, level of output, and revenue for a firm. What is the marginal revenue product of the third worker employed? Okay, let's look at the third worker employed. So the marginal product is the difference additional product. So it's a 4 and will be 18, right? We'll just multiply 18. So that will be 72. So that will be B. Yeah, that's just our very quick quiz together. And next is coming. What are the I would like to share with you other reasons that more talk about why even the theory explains the differentials with the wages, perfect and imperfect market. We understood that the imperfect market we hire less and we pay less than perfect market, but there are still some other factors that affect that today we have these wage differentials